Hi there, and welcome to Ian's Engage channel. I'm Ian. Before getting started, I'd like to thank everyone for their kind comments and condolences after I posted about the death of my father in my previous video. They were very much appreciated at what has been and still is a very difficult time. The last few weeks haven't been easy, but continuing to build Shelfington and watching other people's progress with their layouts has helped in some small way to keep my mind off things. Okay, so let's try and get back to some form of normality. You may remember that in the first part of my laying track video, I'd had a bit of a nightmare and had gone back to the track plan to make modifications to help make the process a bit easier. In this video, I'm going to start over the process of laying track, and hopefully I'll end up with a track design that will live up to my expectations. Before we start though, I'd also like to thank everyone who gave advice and tips for attaching fish plates to rails using a separate piece of rail. It has proved very useful, although is by no means a foolproof method, or at least, for me it isn't. I'm starting to suspect that it's maybe my eyesight that is in need of an upgrade rather than the method of joining rails with fish plates. Anyway, after spending 3 days in the previous video effectively going back to square one, it was now day 4 of my track laying journey, and I was going to concentrate on preparing the baseboards for laying track according to the new plan. So first I printed out the new plan where it differed from the old one, which is pretty much everywhere in front of the scenic breakboard, only this time I used more grid lines to help me line up the sheets more accurately. I was still having problems with creating borderless prints using Rail Modeler Pro, so I had to print with borders again and go through the time-consuming process of cutting off the top and left-hand borders so that the sheets would join together seamlessly. My next job was to have a bit of a tidy up to make some space so I had room to place the new track plan onto the baseboards. As usually happens with these types of projects, the baseboard had basically become a convenient table for storing railway and non-railway related items. So I had to move track, books, mugs, documents, tools and such like that were resting on top of the old track plan, and then remove the part of the old track plan that was now redundant. Finally, I had to remove the scenic breakboard spaces I was using to prevent the top layer of foam from breaching the scenic breakboard gap. On day 5, I was still waiting for some track to arrive, so I spent my time with the mini USB drill finishing off drilling holes into the sleepers of track I already had. You may have noticed that as well as the USB drill, I've also invested in a USB lamp with a flexible gooseneck that was much more convenient to use than holding a torch while drilling the holes. I think the USB lamp will also come in very handy when constructing models and painting them, and could even be useful when I'm under the layout, as you can point it pretty much anywhere to illuminate even the darkest of corners, and when it's plugged into a USB power pack, it's very portable. Day 6 was when I laid the new track plan onto the baseboard. The closer grid spacing made it much easier to line up the sheets, and thankfully this time I didn't end up with any skew with pages, and everything lined up pretty much perfectly eventually. As I was on a roll, I decided to start laying track, and this is where I'd got to by the end of day 6. As you can see, the basics are all there, and I only had the curved bits of FlexiTrack and the long straights behind the scenic breakboard to fit. However, I was worried about the curved FlexiTrack. As already discussed in the previous track laying video, I'd removed all of the S-curves from the plan and was left with only a few pieces of curved FlexiTrack to fit. One of the problems I'd had with the short sections of curved FlexiTrack was that the track pins wouldn't hold the curves in place in the XPS foam because it wasn't sturdy enough to hold onto them without tearing the foam. Thankfully, the curves I had left were quite gentle, and I drilled enough holes into the sleepers of the FlexiTrack to pin it every couple of inches, so it turned out not to be a problem. By the end of day 7, I finally had my 2 main loops set up. Well, nearly set up. I was waiting for a curved point that was required to complete the outer loop. It would also give access to Platform 2 of Shelfington Railway Station, as well as Shelfington Goods Yard eventually. I'll complete the track laying when the curved point arrives, and then it'll be time to power things up. So hopefully we'll soon be able to actually have some trains running. Okay, so that's about it for this update. Thanks again for being patient with me. That just leaves me to say, if you've got any hints, tips, useful tools or techniques to pass on to a beginner in N-Gauge modelling, or if you simply want to say hello, then please do so in the comment section. Anything and everything you've got to say will be greatly appreciated. In the meantime, thanks ever so much for watching. Hopefully I'll have another update in the next couple of weeks. Bye.